Clara Whitmore's knees hit the dirt before she even understood what had happened. 18 days on a stagecoach. 18 days of dust, heat, and prayers whispered into her crumpled letter. And now a clerk stood in the middle of the street, telling her the man who'd promised to marry her had already taken another wife. Her trunk sat on the road like a coffin. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then boots hit the boardwalk behind her, and a voice, low, steady, and furious, cut through the silence like a blade. If you're watching this story, subscribe to the channel and follow Clara's journey all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Clara Whitmore didn't cry. She wanted to. Lord knows she wanted to. But something in her chest locked tight the second that clerk opened his mouth, and she swallowed every tear like broken glass. "Ma'am, I'm real sorry," the young man stammered. He couldn't have been older than 19. His collar was soaked with sweat, and his hands shook against the paper he held. "Mr. Crow, he married Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove last month, June 14th. I got the notice right here." Clara stared at him. 18 days. She'd spent 18 days locked inside a stagecoach that smelled like leather and old tobacco. She'd eaten hardtack and dried apples until her stomach forgot what real food tasted like. She'd written Nathaniel Crow 14 letters before she left Philadelphia, and he'd answered every single one. Sweet words, careful words, words about a future she could see so clearly it felt like touching it. And now this boy, this sweating, stuttering boy, was telling her none of it was real. "He married?" Clara's voice came out flat. Not angry, not broken, just flat. "Yes, ma'am." The clerk swallowed hard. "Last month." "And he didn't write to tell me?" "No, ma'am."
"I reckon well, I don't rightly know why he didn't." Clara looked down at her trunk, sitting in the dust. Everything she owned was in that box. 3 dresses, 2 books, a daguerreotype of her dead mother, a Bible with her grandmother's handwriting in the margins. That was it. That was her whole life, sitting in the Texas dirt, while the sun beat down like God himself was angry. People were watching. She could feel them. Behind windows, behind doors. A woman across the street pretended to sweep her porch, but hadn't moved the broom in 30 seconds. 2 men outside the saloon stopped mid-conversation with their whiskey glasses frozen halfway to their mouths. They all knew. Every single person in this town knew Nathaniel Crow had sent for a bride and then married someone else before she arrived. They knew, and not one of them had sent word. Clara straightened her spine. She pulled her shoulders back. She looked that clerk dead in the eye. "Where is Mr. Crow now?" The boy flinched. "Ma'am, I didn't ask what you think. I asked where he is." He's at the store, but Mrs. Crow is with him, and I really don't think it's a good idea to—" "Thank you." Clara turned and walked toward Crow's general store. Her boots hit the boardwalk like a heartbeat. Steady, deliberate, every step a decision. She could feel the town's eyes following her, could feel the whispers starting like wind before a storm. She pushed the door open. The bell rang. Nathaniel Crow stood behind the counter with a ledger in his hands. He was thinner than she'd imagined from his letters. Narrow shoulders, soft hands, a mustache that looked like it had been trimmed that morning, with the kind of care a man gives to things that don't matter. Next to him stood a woman, tall, dark-haired, wearing a dress that cost more than Clara's entire trunk, pearls at her throat, a smile already forming, not warm, not welcoming, just aware. The kind of smile a woman gives when she knows she's won something. Evelyn Crow. Nathaniel's face went white. "Clara." "Mr. Crow." Silence. Evelyn tilted her head. "So, This is the girl from Philadelphia." Clara didn't look at her. Not yet. She kept her eyes locked on Nathaniel. "You wrote me 14 letters," Clara said. "You described this town. You described your store. You described the house you were building. You told me about the garden you wanted me to plant." Nathaniel's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You sent me money for the stagecoach." "Clara, I can explain. You signed every letter, 'Your future husband.'" Evelyn's smile tightened. "I sold my mother's china to pay for the things you said I'd need," Clara continued. Her voice didn't shake, not once. "I gave up the room I was renting. I told the school where I was teaching that I wouldn't be returning. I burned every bridge I had because you gave me your word." "Things changed," Nathaniel said. Clara let that hang in the air. Things changed. 2 words. That was all he had. 18 days of dust and heat and prayers, and all he could offer was, "Things changed." Evelyn stepped forward. "Miss Whitmore, I understand this must be terribly disappointing, but surely you can see that Nathaniel simply found a more suitable arrangement." Clara finally looked at her. "Suitable," she repeated. "Well, yes." Evelyn smoothed her sleeve. "These mail-order situations are so unpredictable, aren't they? One can hardly blame a man for choosing someone he's actually met. He met me through my letters, 14 of them, and he chose to keep writing. Out of politeness, I'm sure." "Out of dishonesty," Clara said. "There's a difference." Nathaniel put the ledger down. "Now, Clara, let's not make a scene." "A scene?" Clara's voice dropped low. "You left me stranded 1,800 miles from home, with $7 in my pocket and no place to sleep, and you're worried about a scene?" The store went dead quiet. A customer near the back shelves set down a tin of beans and slipped out the door. "I'll reimburse your travel," Nathaniel said quickly. "I'll give you enough to get back to Philadelphia. That's fair." "Fair?" Clara almost laughed. "You think money fixes this? What else do you want me to do?" Clara looked at him for a long time. Really looked at him. At his soft hands and his thin shoulders and his careful mustache. At the way he stood slightly behind Evelyn, like a child behind a mother's skirt. At the way his eyes kept darting to the window, checking who was watching. "Nothing," Clara said quietly. "I don't want you to do anything, Mr. Crow. You've already shown me exactly who you are." She turned to leave, and that's when the door opened. The bell rang again, and the sunlight cut a hard line across the floor, and a man filled the doorway like he'd been built to stand in it. Caleb Turner. He was tall, broad across the shoulders. His shirt was faded from sun and wash and honest work. His hands were rough, ranch hands, scarred and capable. His jaw was set hard under a hat brim that shadowed his eyes, but when he looked at Clara, she saw something she hadn't expected. Anger. Not at her, at the room. "Heard there was a situation," Caleb said. His voice was low, the kind of low that made people listen whether they wanted to or not. Nathaniel stiffened. "This is a private matter, Turner." "Private?" Caleb looked at him. "Half the town's standing outside your window, Crow. Ain't nothing private about what you did." Evelyn stepped forward. "Mr. Turner, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns me plenty." Caleb took off his hat, held it against his chest, looked at Clara with the kind of directness that felt like solid ground under her feet. "Ma'am, I don't know you, but I know what happened here, and I know it ain't right." Clara studied him. "And what do you think happened here?" "A man gave his word. Then he broke it. Left a woman stranded with no way home and no place to go." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Where I come from, that makes a man less than the dirt on his boots." "Now hold on," Nathaniel started. "I ain't talking to you."
Caleb didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed on Clara. "Ma'am, I got a ranch about 8 miles east of here, Red Mesa. I ain't rich, I ain't polished, but I got a roof, I got work, and I got my word, which is more than this man can say." Evelyn laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "You can't be serious. You're offering to, what, marry a woman you've known for 30 seconds? "I'm offering her a choice," Caleb said quietly, "which is more than anyone in this room has done." Clara's breath caught, not because of the offer, not because of the words, because of the way he said it, like it was the simplest thing in the world, like a woman deserving a choice was as obvious as the sun being hot. "I don't need charity," Clara said. "Ain't charity, ma'am. I need help at the ranch. Can't keep books to save my life. Lost more money to bad math than bad weather." He almost smiled. Almost. "You're educated. I'm not. Seems like a fair trade." "A trade," Clara said. "A partnership, if you want it." Nathaniel laughed nervously. "Clara, you can't seriously consider—" "Why not?" Clara turned on him. "You dissolved our arrangement without a single word of warning. You don't get to have opinions on what I do next." That shut him up. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She looked at Caleb like she was seeing a cockroach in her parlor. "The whole town will talk." "They're already talking," Caleb said. "Might as well give them something worth saying." Clara looked at him, really looked, at his rough hands and his sun-darkened skin, at the way he stood, not behind anyone, not beside anyone, just solid, present, like a man who didn't need permission to take up space. "If I come to your ranch," Clara said slowly, "I have conditions." "Name them." "Separate quarters, until I decide otherwise." "You'll have your own room. Door locks from the inside." "I want a legal contract. My work, my pay, not an allowance. Wages." Something flickered in Caleb's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Done." "And I have a voice, in decisions, in finances, in everything that affects my life under that roof." "Ma'am, I wouldn't have it any other way." Evelyn's face went tight. "This is absurd. You're going to regret this, Miss Whitmore. That ranch is nothing but dust and debt." Clara picked up her trunk. It was heavy. Heavier than it should have been for everything she owned in the world. But she lifted it with both hands and held it against her chest like armor. "Dust washes off," Clara said. "Broken promises don't." She walked out the door. Caleb followed. The town watched. Every face, every window, every porch. They watched Clara Whitmore walk down the main street of Dusty Bluff, Texas, with her trunk in her arms and the stranger's offer in her pocket, and not one of them said a word. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes was standing outside her boarding house. She was a small woman, silver-haired, with hands that had kneaded 10,000 biscuits and buried 2 husbands. She watched Clara and Caleb approach with eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Hayes," Caleb said, tipping his hat, "this is Miss Whitmore. She needs a room for a day or two while we sort out arrangements." Eleanor looked at Clara, looked at the trunk, looked at the dust on her hem and the steel in her spine. "I heard what happened," Eleanor said softly. "Come inside, child. I've got soup on the stove and a bed with clean sheets." Clara's jaw trembled, just for a second, just enough for Eleanor to see it. "Thank you," Clara whispered. Eleanor took her arm. "Don't you thank me. You thank yourself for walking out of that store with your head up. That took more courage than most men in this town have got in their whole body." Inside the boarding house, Clara sat at the kitchen table while Eleanor ladled soup into a bowl. Caleb stood by the door, hat in his hands. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. We can ride out to the ranch. You can see the place before you decide anything." Clara nodded. "Mr. Turner." "Ma'am?" "Why did you come into that store?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. He turned his hat in his hands, slowly, like he was choosing his words the way a man chooses where to place his boots on uneven ground. "Because I lost my mother when I was 12, he said. "And before she died, she told me something I ain't never forgotten." Clara waited. She said, "Caleb, the measure of a man ain't what he builds. It's what he won't let fall." He put his hat back on. "I couldn't let you fall, ma'am. Not when I had two good legs to stand on." He nodded to Eleanor. Then he walked out into the dying heat. Clara stared at the closed door. Eleanor sat down across from her with her own bowl of soup. "That man," Eleanor said quietly, "has been alone on that ranch for 4 years. Lost his wife to fever the first winter. Nearly lost the ranch to drought 2 years after. The crows have been circling his land like vultures ever since." Clara looked at her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to know what you're walking into." Eleanor's eyes were steady. "Caleb Turner is the most honest man in this county. But honest men don't always win." "And Nathaniel Crow?" Eleanor's mouth thinned. "Nathaniel Crow is a coward who married money and calls it ambition. Evelyn runs that store, that bank, and half this town. She wanted Caleb's water rights 2 years ago. He refused to sell. She hasn't forgotten." Clara's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "Water rights?" "Red Mesa sits on the best spring in the county. In drought season, that water's worth more than gold." Eleanor leaned forward. "You think Nathaniel marrying Evelyn was about love? That woman owns the bank that holds notes on half the ranches in the valley, including Caleb's southern pasture." Clara set her spoon down. "He doesn't know, does he?" she said. "Caleb doesn't know how much danger he's in." "He knows enough, but knowing and fighting are different things. That man's been surviving so long he forgot what it feels like to have someone standing next to him." Clara looked at her soup. The steam curled up and disappeared like every plan she'd made for the last 3 months. She'd come to Texas expecting a husband, a home, a garden. Instead, she'd found a liar, a vulture, and a man who walked into a store to catch a stranger before she fell. "Mrs. Hayes," Clara said. "Call me Eleanor." "Eleanor, what's the interest rate on that banknote?" Eleanor blinked. Then she laughed. A short, sharp sound, like a match striking. "Now that," Eleanor said, "is the first smart question anyone's asked in this town in years." Clara lifted her spoon again. She ate her soup. She did not cry. And somewhere east of town, in a ranch house with a broken porch rail and dust on every surface, Caleb Turner sat alone at his kitchen table and stared at his hands and wondered if he'd just done the bravest thing in his life, or the most foolish. He didn't know the answer, but for the first time in 4 years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. And it terrified him. Clara was awake before the sun. She'd barely slept. The mattress at Eleanor's boarding house was softer than anything she'd had in 18 days, but her mind wouldn't stop turning. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nathaniel's face, that pale, pinched look of a man caught in his own lie. And then she saw Caleb Turner standing in the doorway, with his hat against his chest, offering her something no one had offered in years: a choice. She dressed quickly, buttoned every button, pulled her hair back tight. If she was going to see this ranch, she was going to see it with clear eyes and a clear head. Eleanor was already in the kitchen. "You eat before you go," Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry. I said eat." Clara sat down. Eleanor put a plate of eggs and biscuits in front of her, and poured coffee so strong it could have stripped paint. "He'll be here at 7, Eleanor said. "That man hasn't been late to anything in his life. Punctual as death." "You know him well?" "I knew his wife." Eleanor sat down across from her. "Sarah. Sweet girl. Too sweet for this country, maybe. She got the fever their first winter and was gone inside a week. Caleb sat on that porch for 3 days after she passed. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. Miguel, that's his ranch hand, had to drag him inside before the cold took him too." Clara wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. 4 years alone. 4 years working himself half to death so he wouldn't have to think about it. Eleanor leaned back. "That man built fences, broke horses, dug irrigation ditches with his bare hands. Anything to keep moving. Because if he stopped, it all came rushing back." "And you think I'm supposed to fix that?" Eleanor gave her a sharp look. "I think you're supposed to fix yourself. Whatever he needs fixing, that's his business." The door knocked at exactly 7. Clara opened it. Caleb stood on the porch with his hat in his hands. He'd shaved. His shirt was cleaner than yesterday's, and his boots had been wiped down, though the dust was already creeping back up the leather. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning, Mr. Turner." "Wagon's out front. It's about 40 minutes to the ranch." "Then we shouldn't waste daylight." Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile, more like the memory of one. They rode in silence for the first 20 minutes. Clara sat straight on the wagon bench, her hands folded in her lap, watching the land open up around them. She didn't comment on it. She was thinking. "You said you can't keep books," she said finally. "No, ma'am. Numbers and I don't get along." "How bad is it?" Caleb was quiet for a beat too long. "Bad enough that I know I'm losing money. Not bad enough that I know where." "Do you have ledgers?" "Got a stack of papers in a drawer. Some of them might be ledgers. Most of them might be kindling." "That's not a system, Mr. Turner. That's a fire hazard." He looked at her. Really looked. And this time, the smile came through. Small, tired, but real. "You always this direct?" "I was a schoolteacher in Philadelphia. Direct was the only way to survive a room full of 12-year-olds. "Reckon that's fair preparation for a ranch full of cattle. Cattle listen better than children." "Cattle don't listen at all." "Exactly my point." Caleb laughed. It was short, rough, like a sound his throat had forgotten how to make. But it was real, and Clara noticed. They pulled up to Red Mesa Ranch. Clara looked at the house and didn't say what she was thinking. The porch rail was broken. The front steps sagged. There was dust on every surface she could see through the windows. But the structure was solid. The bones were good. "It ain't much," Caleb said. He said it fast, like he wanted to get the apology out before she could form her own opinion. "It's honest," Clara said. "That's more than I expected from Texas." A man came around the side of the barn. Short, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and a mustache that belonged on a man twice his size. He stopped when he saw Clara. "Miguel Alvarez," Caleb said. "Best ranch hand in the county. Miguel, this is Miss Whitmore." Miguel took off his hat. "Ma'am?" "Mr. Alvarez." Miguel looked at Caleb, then back at Clara, then at Caleb again. His eyebrows said everything his mouth didn't. "She's here about the bookkeeping," Caleb said. "Bookkeeping," Miguel repeated. "That's what I said." "Right." Miguel put his hat back on. "I'll be in the barn, with the horses, who don't need bookkeeping." He walked away, and Clara could have sworn she heard him laughing. Caleb led her inside. The house was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing she'd hoped for. Dishes in the basin, dust on the mantel, a stack of papers on the kitchen table that looked like it had been growing for months. Clara picked up the first sheet. It was a receipt from Crow's General Store. She picked up the second. Another receipt. Crow's General Store. The third, the fourth, the fifth. All from Crow's. "Mr. Turner, where else do you buy supplies?" "Nowhere else. Crow's is the only store in town." Clara spread the receipts across the table. Her eyes moved fast. Numbers were her language. They always had been. Where other people saw rows of figures, she saw patterns. And right now, the pattern was screaming. "These prices are wrong," she said. Caleb frowned. "What do you mean?" "Barbed wire. You're paying $3.40 a roll. Standard price in any catalog I've seen is $2.10. "Well, it's Texas. Things cost more out here." "Not 60% more." Clara pulled another receipt. "Salt. $2 a barrel. That's nearly double the going rate. And here, lumber. $7.50 for pine board that should cost $4 even with freight." Caleb stared at the receipts. "You sure about this?" "Mr. Turner, I taught arithmetic for 4 years. I'm sure." He sat down slowly, put his hands on the table. She could see it happening, the realization moving across his face like a shadow. "He's been overcharging me." "He's been overcharging you for what looks like at least a year, maybe longer." "I'd need to see the full records." "The full records are in that drawer." He pointed to a cabinet by the wall. All of them. Clara opened the drawer. It was stuffed. Receipts, notes, scraps of paper with figures scrawled in pencil. Some of them were stained with coffee. One had what looked like a boot print on it. "This is going to take time," she said. "How much time?" "Days? Maybe a week?" "Then I guess you'd better start." Clara looked at him. "Is that your way of asking me to stay?" "It's my way of saying the job's real, the work's real, and the offer stands." "I haven't agreed to marry you, Mr. Turner." "I know that." "I've agreed to look at your books." "I know that too." "Good. As long as we're clear." "Crystal, ma'am." Clara pulled out a chair and sat down with the stack of receipts. She began sorting them by date. Caleb watched her for a moment, then stood. "I'll be out with the herd. Miguel can show you where things are if you need anything." "Mr. Turner," he stopped at the door. "How much do you owe the bank?" The silence that followed was heavier than the heat. "I don't rightly know the exact figure," Caleb said slowly. "There's a note on the southern pasture. My father took it out 15 years ago. I've been making payments, but..." "But you don't know how much is left?" "No." "Do you have the original loan documents?" "Somewhere in that drawer, I reckon." Clara nodded. "I'll find them." Caleb looked at her from the doorway. The morning light was behind him, and she couldn't see his eyes, but she could feel them. "Miss Whitmore." "Yes?" "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You might not like what I find." He put his hat on and walked out. Clara worked through the morning without stopping. She spread papers across every surface in the kitchen. She built columns of numbers in a notebook she found on a shelf. She cross-referenced dates, amounts, payments. By noon, she had a picture. It was worse than she'd thought. Caleb owed $1,200 on the southern pasture. The note had been taken out by his father in 1861 at 6% interest. Standard terms, fair terms. But the payment record didn't match. According to Caleb's receipts, he'd been making payments regularly. $20 a month, sometimes $25. 15 years of payments should have brought the balance down to almost nothing. But the bank statement, which she found crumpled at the bottom of the drawer, showed a remaining balance of $940. That was impossible, unless someone was misapplying the payments. Clara's hands went cold. She pulled the bank statement closer. The handwriting was small and precise. At the bottom, in ink so dark it looked fresh, was a signature. Evelyn Crow, bank manager. Clara sat back in her chair. Nathaniel Crow owned the store that overcharged Caleb for supplies. Evelyn Crow managed the bank that held his land note, and between the two of them, they were bleeding him dry from both sides, and he didn't even know it. "Oh, God," Clara whispered. She heard boots on the porch, heavy, fast. Miguel came through the door with his hat in his hand and sweat running down his face. "Miss Whitmore, you need to come outside." "What happened?" "Caleb's horse threw him. He's down by the south fence." Clara was on her feet before Miguel finished the sentence. She ran. She didn't think about her dress or the dust or the heat. She ran across the yard and down the path toward the south pasture, and she found Caleb sitting in the dirt with his left arm pressed against his ribs and his face the color of old ash. "It's nothing," he said through his teeth. "You're gray." "That's my natural color." "Mr. Turner, you are not amusing." "Wasn't trying to be." He tried to stand, and his whole body seized. He grabbed his side and went back down on one knee. Clara knelt beside him. She put her hand on his shoulder, firm, steady, the way you'd hold a child who was trying to be brave. "Let me see." "It's just bruised." "Let me see." He looked at her. Something in his eyes shifted. Not surrender, something closer to surprise. Like he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone insist on looking after him. He moved his arm. Clara pressed gently along his ribs. He flinched hard at the third one. "That's cracked," she said. "Maybe broken. You need to be wrapped." "I need to finish the fence." "Miguel can finish the fence. You need to be inside with a bandage and a chair." "Ma'am." "Don't ma'am me. Stand up. Lean on my shoulder. We're walking back." "You're half my size." "And twice your sense. Move." Miguel appeared behind them. He got under Caleb's other arm without being asked. "You listen to her, boss," Miguel said. "She's scarier than the horse." "I'm starting to notice," Caleb said. They got him inside. Clara wrapped his ribs with strips torn from a clean sheet she found in the closet. Her hands were quick and sure. She'd done this before, not with ranchers, but with students who fell from trees and factory workers who came to her evening literacy class with injuries they couldn't afford to have a doctor look at. "Hold still." "It hurts." "It's supposed to hurt. You fell off a horse." "The horse fell first. I just followed." "That's not better." Clara tied off the bandage and stepped back. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, breathing carefully, his left arm held tight against his side. And then he saw the papers. Every receipt, every bank statement, every scrap of evidence she'd spent the morning assembling, spread across his kitchen table like a map of his own ruin. "What is all this?" he asked. Clara sat down across from him. She folded her hands. She looked him in the eye. "Mr. Turner, Nathaniel Crow has been overcharging you for supplies for at least 2 years. The markup averages between 40 and 60% above standard wholesale pricing." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And Evelyn Crow, through the bank, has been misapplying your loan payments. You should owe roughly $200 on your southern pasture. According to their records, you owe $940. The kitchen went silent. Not the comfortable silence of two people sharing space. The sharp, brittle silence of a man realizing he's been robbed by people he trusted. $940, Caleb said. His voice was flat. Dangerous. "Yes. I've been paying that note for 15 years. "I know. $20 a month, every month. Even when I had to sell cattle I couldn't afford to lose. I know. And they just took it? They redirected it. Applied your payments to interest only. Let the principal sit. On paper, it looks like you've barely paid anything. Caleb stood up. His ribs screamed at him, and he didn't care. That land was my father's. I know. He worked that pasture until his hands bled. He built the first fence on it with wood he cut himself. He's buried on it, Clara. My mother, too. It was the first time he'd used her name. Clara noticed. Caleb, she said, and it was the first time she'd used his. Sit down. We're going to fix this. How? The right way, with numbers and witnesses and the law. The law in this town is Judge Perkins, and he drinks whiskey with Nathaniel Crow every Thursday night. Then we go above Judge Perkins. Caleb stared at her. You don't know what these people are capable of. I know exactly what they're capable of. I stood in their store yesterday and watched them lie to my face without blinking. Clara's voice dropped low. They treated me like freight that arrived at the wrong address. They're treating you like a problem they can solve with paperwork and patience. But they made a mistake. What mistake? They brought an accountant into the middle of their scheme. Caleb looked at her. He looked at the papers. He looked at his own hands, rough, cracked. The hands of a man who'd fought drought and loss and loneliness for 4 years. You're asking me to trust you, he said. I'm asking you to trust the numbers. They don't lie. People do. I know. That's why I'm using numbers instead. Something changed in Caleb Turner's face. It wasn't soft. It wasn't romantic. It was harder than that. Deeper. It was the look of a man who'd been fighting alone for so long he'd forgotten reinforcements existed. All right, he said. All right. Tell me what you need. I need every document you have, every receipt, every letter, every bank statement going back as far as you can find. They're all in that drawer. I need more than what's in the drawer. I need the original loan agreement your father signed. I need the county records of the property lines. And I need someone in this town who isn't afraid of Evelyn Crow. Caleb sat back down, slowly. There's Reverend Collins. He's honest, but he's careful. Careful is fine. Careful means he'll check the facts before he speaks. That's what we need. And what do I do? Clara looked at him. You heal. You work your ranch. You don't change a single thing about how you deal with the Crows. You buy your supplies at the same prices. You make your next loan payment on time. You want me to keep paying them? I want them to think nothing has changed. The moment they know I've found this, they'll move. They'll call the note early. They'll claim breach of contract. They'll find some clause buried in the paperwork that lets them take the pasture before we're ready to fight. Caleb's eyes narrowed. You've done this before. Not this exactly, but I've seen what happens when powerful people realize they've been caught. They don't surrender. They accelerate. So we play it quiet. We play it smart. And when we're ready, when I have every number, every discrepancy, every cent they've stolen documented and witnessed, we walk into that bank in broad daylight and we lay it all on the table. And if they deny it, they can't deny arithmetic, Caleb. 2 + 2 is 4, whether Evelyn Crow likes it or not. He shook his head slowly. I was just trying to keep this ranch alive. I didn't know I was fighting a war. You weren't. You are now. And you're staying? Clara looked at the papers on the table, at the crumpled receipts and the damning bank statements, and the loan document with her enemy's signature at the bottom. I'm staying. The bookkeeping arrangement? The partnership. She held his eyes. That's what you called it. A partnership. And right now, you need a partner more than you need a bookkeeper. Caleb Turner sat in his kitchen with cracked ribs and stolen land and a drawer full of evidence that should have broken him. But he didn't look broken.
He looked like a man who just realized the ground under his feet was solid again. "Then we have a deal, Miss Whitmore." "Clara." "Clara." He extended his hand. Rough, scarred, honest. She took it. And outside, in the merciless Texas heat, the road stretched back toward a town that had no idea what was coming. Clara worked for 6 days straight. She barely ate. She barely slept. Every receipt, every bank statement, every scrap of paper from that drawer became a weapon in her hands. She built a ledger so clean and precise that every stolen cent screamed off the page. Dates, amounts, discrepancies. 15 years of payments mapped against 15 years of lies. And on the 7th day, she found the clause. It was buried on the 3rd page of the original loan agreement, the one Caleb's father had signed in 1861. A small paragraph, written in language so careful it almost looked harmless. In the event of default or failure to maintain agreed payment schedule, the lending institution reserves the right to demand full repayment within 30 days, after which the collateral property shall transfer in full. Acceleration clause. Standard language. Nothing unusual. Except for one thing. Someone had amended the clause. In different ink. In different handwriting. The original document said 60 days. The amendment changed it to 30. And at the bottom of the amendment, in that same precise, dark handwriting Clara had seen on the bank statement, was a signature. Evelyn Crow. The amendment was dated 3 months ago. Clara's stomach dropped. They weren't just stealing from Caleb. They were preparing to take his land. The overcharging, the misapplied payments, the quiet manipulation. It was all building toward one moment. One missed payment. One default. And then the Crows would own the southern pasture, the spring, and the water rights that every ranch in the valley depended on. Clara grabbed the document and ran. Caleb was at the south fence with Miguel, replacing posts that had rotted through. His ribs were still wrapped, but he worked like a man who decided pain was just another thing to carry. "Stop," Clara said. He looked up. "We need to talk. Now." Something in her voice made Miguel set down his hammer without being asked. Caleb wiped his hands on his trousers and walked to her. "What'd you find?" Clara held up the loan document. "They changed the terms. The original agreement your father signed gave 60 days for repayment in case of default. Someone amended it to 30. Evelyn signed the amendment 3 months ago." Caleb took the paper. His eyes moved slowly across the words. She watched his face change, not gradually, but all at once, like a door slamming shut. "She forged an amendment on my father's loan." "She didn't forge it, she added it. There's a difference in law, but the result is the same. If you miss one payment, even one, they can demand full repayment in 30 days. And when you can't pay $940 in 30 days, they take the pasture. They take everything south of the creek, including the spring." Caleb's hand tightened on the paper until it shook. Miguel stepped forward. "Boss, not now, Miguel. Boss, listen to me. Last week, when I went to town for nails, Evelyn Crow asked me how the herd was looking. She asked how many head we lost to the heat. She asked if the south pasture grass was holding." Caleb looked at him. "She's never asked me a damn thing before," Miguel said. "Not once in 4 years. And suddenly she wants to know about our grass?" Clara felt the pieces locked together. She's checking whether the ranch is vulnerable. If the herd is thin and the pasture is dry, you're more likely to miss a payment. "And if you miss a payment, I heard you the first time." Caleb's voice was low and hard. "When's the next payment due?" "August 1st. 3 weeks." "How much?" $20. I can make $20. That's not the point. The point is they don't want you to make it. They want a reason to trigger the clause. And if they can't find a reason, they'll create one. How? Clara looked at him. How much of your income comes from selling cattle through the Crow stockyard? Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. She could see it on his face. All of it, she said. Most of it. If Evelyn decides not to buy your cattle this month, or offers you half price, you can't make the payment. And you can't sell anywhere else because the nearest stockyard is 2 days' ride. So I'm trapped. You were trapped. Now you know about it. That changes everything. Does it? Caleb threw the paper down. I know they're cheating me. I know they changed the terms, but knowing, don't put $20 in my hand on August 1st. No, but it puts evidence in front of a witness. Caleb stopped. What witness? Reverend Collins. You said he's honest. I need him to see these documents. I need him to verify the discrepancies. And I need him to do it before the Crows know we're coming. And then what? Then we walk into that bank and we don't ask for anything. We don't beg. We don't negotiate. We present the facts in front of the town and we let Evelyn Crow explain why her numbers don't add up. She'll lie. She can't lie to arithmetic. Every receipt I've documented matches a record in her own bank. Her handwriting is on the amendment. Her signature is on the statements. She built her trap so carefully that she left fingerprints on every piece. Caleb picked up the paper again. He stared at his father's signature. Old ink, faded, the handwriting of a man who'd been dead for 8 years. My father trusted them, he said quietly. He bought his first supplies from Nathaniel's father. He took that loan in good faith. I know. And they've been eating us alive ever since. Yes. Clara. Yes? If this doesn't work, if we go in there and Collins won't back us, or the town sides with them, I lose the pasture. I lose the water. I lose the ranch. I know. You willing to bet everything on a stack of paper? Clara looked at him, at his cracked hands and his wrapped ribs and his eyes that held 4 years of grief and stubbornness and a hope so fragile he was afraid to hold it. I'm betting on the truth, she said. Paper is just how I carry it. The next morning, Clara went to see Reverend Collins alone. She wore her best dress, the blue one with the white collar that she'd been saving for her wedding day. The wedding that never happened. She pressed it that morning and put it on like armor. The church was empty when she arrived. Collins was at his desk in the back room, writing a sermon. He was a lean man, with wire spectacles and hands stained with ink. When Clara knocked, he looked up with the careful expression of a man who'd already heard the gossip. Miss Whitmore. Reverend Collins? I heard about your situation. My situation is not why I'm here. Clara set her ledger on his desk. I'm here because Caleb Turner is being robbed, and I need a witness who isn't afraid to say so. Collins took off his spectacles. That's a serious accusation. It's a documented one. Clara opened the ledger. Every figure in this book is pulled directly from receipts and bank statements in Caleb Turner's possession. I've cross-referenced 15 years of loan payments against the bank's records. The discrepancy is over $700. 700? $740 in payments that were applied to interest instead of principal. Payments that should have nearly cleared the debt. Instead, the balance shows $940 outstanding. Collins put his spectacles back on. He pulled the ledger closer. His eyes moved down the columns, and Clara watched his face shift from polite skepticism to something much colder. This handwriting on the bank statements, he said. That's Evelyn's. Yes.
And this amendment to the loan terms, signed by Evelyn 3 months ago, changing the default window from 60 days to 30, without Caleb's knowledge or consent. Collins closed the ledger. He sat back. He took off his spectacles again and rubbed his eyes. "Do you know what you're asking me to do, Miss Whitmore?" "I'm asking you to look at numbers and tell the truth about what they say." "You're asking me to stand against the family that pays for half the pews in this church." "I'm asking you to choose between their money and your integrity." Collins flinched, not from anger, from recognition. "The Crows have been part of this community for 20 years, he said carefully, "and they've been stealing from it for at least 15. You've been in this town 1 week. Arithmetic doesn't need residency, Reverend." He stared at her. Then he opened the ledger again. "Show me everything," he said. Clara did. For 2 hours, she walked him through every discrepancy, every inflated price, every misapplied payment. She showed him the original loan agreement and the forged amendment. She showed him the pattern, how the Crows used the store to drain Caleb's cash and the bank to trap his land, working both sides like a pair of jaws, closing slowly on the same bone. When she finished, Collins was pale. "This isn't just Caleb," he said. "If they're doing this to him, then they're doing it to others, yes. The Henderson Ranch defaulted last year. The Morrison place the year before. Both lost land to the bank." "And who bought that land?" Collins looked at her. He already knew the answer. Evelyn, at auction prices, pennies on the dollar. Because she controlled the notes, she controlled the defaults, and she controlled the sales. Collins stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there for a long time. "If I stand with you on this," he said, "and it fails, I lose my church. If you don't stand, you lose something worse." "What?" "The right to call yourself a man of God." The Reverend turned around. His face was set, decided. "When?" "Saturday, town market day. The bank will be open. Half the county will be there." "That's 4 days. I need 3 of them to make copies of every document. The originals stay with me. The copies go to you. If anything happens to one set, the other survives." "You think they'd destroy evidence?" "I think Evelyn Crow would burn down this church if she thought the ashes would keep her secret." Collins nodded slowly. "Saturday, then." Saturday. Clara walked out of the church and straight into Evelyn Crow. The woman was standing on the church steps like she owned them. Her dress was immaculate. Her hair was perfect. Her smile was the most dangerous thing Clara had ever seen. "Miss Whitmore, what a pleasant surprise." "Mrs. Crow?" "Visiting Reverend Collins? How spiritual of you. I didn't think bookkeepers had much use for prayer." Clara's heart was pounding, but her face was stone. "Everyone has use for prayer, Mrs. Crow. Even bankers." Evelyn's smile didn't waver. "I hear you've been staying out at Red Mesa, doing some work for Caleb Turner?" "He needed his books organized." "Did he?" Evelyn tilted her head. "And how did you find his books?" "Dusty. I meant the financial situation." "I'm not at liberty to discuss a client's finances." "Client?" Evelyn's laugh was soft and sharp like a blade wrapped in silk. "Is that what he is?" "That's what he is, because the town has a different word for a woman living on an unmarried man's ranch." Clara felt the heat rise in her chest. She pushed it down. "The town can use whatever words it likes. I'm not here to manage reputations." "No? Then what are you here to manage, Miss Whitmore?" Clara looked Evelyn dead in the eye. "Numbers. They're the only thing in this town that doesn't lie." Something flickered behind Evelyn's smile. Just for a second. Just enough. "Enjoy your stay at Red Mesa," Evelyn said. "I do hope it lasts." She walked past Clara and into the church. Clara didn't look back. She walked straight to the boarding house, sat down at Eleanor's kitchen table, and put her head in her hands. "She knows," Clara said. Eleanor set down a cup of coffee. "She suspects. That's different. She was waiting for me outside the church. She asked about Caleb's finances. Evelyn Crow asks about everyone's finances. That's how she keeps score. She's going to move before Saturday." Eleanor sat down. "Then you need to be ready." "I am ready. The numbers are solid. Collins will testify. But if she calls the note early, she can't call it early without cause. She'll manufacture cause. She'll claim a missed payment or a breach of terms. She changed the amendment once. She can change it again." Eleanor's eyes went hard. "Not if the original is somewhere safe. It's at the ranch. Then it shouldn't be." Clara stared at her. "Where?" Eleanor stood and opened a flour tin on her kitchen shelf. She pulled out a small iron key. "My late husband built a safe under the floorboards in the back bedroom. Not even the tax assessor knows about it. You put those papers in there, and they stay there until Saturday." Clara took the key. Her hand was shaking. "Eleanor, why are you helping me?" "Because my husband lost 40 acres to that woman's father-in-law 30 years ago, and he died believing it was his own fault." Eleanor's voice cracked just once. "It wasn't. And I've been waiting a long time for someone smart enough to prove it." Clara brought the original documents to Eleanor's that night. She copied every figure, every signature, every damning line into a duplicate ledger that she left at the ranch. 2 sets of evidence, 2 locations. If one burned, the other survived. Wednesday passed. Thursday. Every hour felt like a held breath. On Friday afternoon, Caleb rode into town to buy supplies at Crow's store. Same as always, same prices, same polite exchange with the clerk. He paid without complaint and loaded his wagon. But as he was leaving, Nathaniel Crow stepped out of the back office. "Turner." Caleb stopped. "Crow? I hear your new bookkeeper is quite thorough." "She's organized. I needed organized. She's also been visiting Reverend Collins, twice this week." Caleb's stomach turned cold, but his face didn't move. "She's new in town. Reckon she's looking for spiritual guidance." "Guidance?" Nathaniel's mouth twitched. "Is that what they're calling it?" "I don't know what you're calling it, Crow. I call it none of your business." "Everything in this town is my business, Turner. My store, my bank, my customers. I've been very patient with your account over the years." Patient. The word tasted like poison in Caleb's mouth. Very patient. But patience has limits. Nathaniel straightened his vest. "I want you to know, purely as a matter of professional courtesy, that the bank will be reviewing several ranch accounts next month, including yours." "Review away." "I'd hate for any irregularities to surface." Caleb took one step toward him, just one, but it was enough to make Nathaniel take a step back. "I'd hate for that too," Caleb said quietly. "I truly would." He walked out. He drove straight to the ranch and found Clara at the kitchen table. "They know," Caleb said. "What did Nathaniel say?" "He said they're reviewing accounts. He mentioned irregularities. He knows you've been to see Collins." Clara pressed her palms flat on the table. "How much time do we have?" "He said next month, but that's not what he meant." "What did he mean?" "He meant he's doing it now. Tonight. Tomorrow. Before we can move." Clara stood up. "Then we don't wait for Saturday." "What?" "We go tomorrow. First thing. Bank opens at 9. The market starts at 8. Half the town will be there by the time we walk through that door." "Tomorrow? Clara, are you sure?" "If we wait, they'll alter the records.
They'll destroy their copies. They'll rewrite the amendment again, or claim the original was always 30 days. We go tomorrow, or we don't go at all. Caleb looked at her. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. And if it doesn't work? Clara gathered her papers. Her hands were steady now. Her voice was iron. Then we lose everything. But at least we lose it standing up. Caleb sat down across from her. He watched her organize the evidence. Every receipt in order. Every calculation checked. Every page numbered and cross-referenced. He watched her hands move with the precision of a woman who had turned paper into a weapon and numbers into a war. Clara. She looked up. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know something. What? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't walk into that store last week just because it was the right thing to do. Clara went still. I saw you step off that stagecoach, he said. I was across the street, loading feed. And I watched you stand in that road after that clerk told you the truth. And you didn't scream. You didn't cry. You just stood there with your chin up and your fists tight, and I thought, that is the strongest woman I have ever seen in my life. Clara's throat closed. I walked into that store because I couldn't stand the thought of a woman like you believing the world had given up on her. His voice was rough, barely there. Because the world gave up on me once, and nobody walked through the door. Clara blinked. Once. Hard. Caleb. You don't have to say anything. I needed you to know. Before tomorrow. She reached across the table. She put her hand over his. I know, she said. They sat like that for a long moment. Two people at a kitchen table covered in evidence and fury and something neither one of them was ready to name. Then Clara pulled her hand back and picked up her pen. Now help me check these figures one more time. Caleb almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. And somewhere in town, in a house that smelled like lavender and ambition, Evelyn Crow sat at her own desk, staring at her own ledger, and realized for the first time that the girl from Philadelphia wasn't just a nuisance. She was a threat. Evelyn closed her ledger. She picked up her pen. She began to write. And the letter she wrote was addressed to Judge Perkins. Clara was dressed and ready by 6 in the morning. She hadn't slept, not really. She'd lain in Eleanor's guest bed, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in her head like prayers, checking and rechecking every figure until the math blurred into something that felt less like accounting and more like a loaded gun. Eleanor was waiting in the kitchen with coffee and a look that said she already knew. Today, Eleanor said. Today. You eat something. I can't. Clara Whitmore, you are about to walk into a fight with the most powerful woman in this county. You will not do it on an empty stomach. Clara sat down. She ate half a biscuit. She drank the coffee. Her hands were steady, but her pulse was hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. The papers, Clara said. I need the originals from the safe. Eleanor went to the back bedroom. She came back with a leather folder tied with string. Every original document, every receipt, every damning page with Evelyn Crow's handwriting on it. Clara held it against her chest. Eleanor, go, before you lose your nerve. I'm not going to lose my nerve. I know. I said it for me, not for you. Clara walked out the front door and nearly collided with Caleb. He was standing on the porch. Clean shirt, shaved jaw. His hat was in his hands again. She was starting to understand that was his way of showing respect. He held his hat when he meant something. You're early, Clara said. Couldn't sleep. Neither could I. Ribs hurt. Liar, you were nervous. That too. He put his hat on.
Miguel's watching the ranch. I told him if we weren't back by noon, he should ride to the county seat and find a real lawyer. That's dramatic. That's practical. You ready? Clara looked down at the leather folder in her arms. Everything she'd found in 7 days. Every stolen cent. Every manipulated clause. Every lie written in ink and signed with confidence by people who never expected anyone to check their work. I'm ready. They walked into town side by side. The market was already alive. Wagons lined the main street. Ranchers' wives sold eggs and butter from tailgates. Children chased each other between the stalls. It was the kind of Saturday morning that looked like a painting. Ordinary, golden, full of the quiet business of people living their lives. Nobody knew what was coming. Clara saw Reverend Collins standing outside the church. He was holding his Bible against his chest, the same way she was holding her folder. When he saw her, he nodded once. He was ready too. They walked to the bank. Clara's boots hit the boardwalk in rhythm with her heartbeat. Caleb walked half a step behind her, not because she'd asked him to, but because he understood. This was her fight. He was her witness. Clara pushed the door open. The bank was small. One desk, one counter. A safe in the back that was more rust than iron. A clerk sat behind the counter, the same young man who'd told Clara about Nathaniel's marriage 8 days ago. His face went white when he saw her. "Miss Whitmore, I need to see Mrs. Crow. She's not in yet." "Then I'll wait." Clara sat down in the chair across from the desk. She placed the leather folder on her lap. Caleb stood by the door with his arms crossed. Reverend Collins entered behind him and stood near the window. The clerk looked at all three of them. Then he bolted through the back door. 2 minutes passed. 3. 5. The front door opened. Evelyn Crow walked in like she owned the air. She was wearing dark blue. Her hair was pinned with precision. Her eyes swept the room. Clara, Caleb, Collins. And something shifted behind her smile. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition. The recognition of a woman who had expected this moment, but hoped it would come later. "Miss Whitmore." Evelyn's voice was silk over steel. "What an unexpected visit." "Not that unexpected, I think." Evelyn sat down behind the desk. She folded her hands. "What can I do for you?" Clara opened the folder. "You can explain this." She placed the first document on the desk, the original loan agreement from 1861. "This is the note Caleb Turner's father signed 15 years ago. The terms are clear. 6% interest, monthly payments of $20, 60-day grace period in case of default." Evelyn glanced at it. "I'm familiar with the document." "Are you?" Clara placed the second paper beside it. "Because this is the amendment you signed 3 months ago, changing the grace period from 60 days to 30, without Mr. Turner's knowledge or consent." Evelyn's smile didn't waver. "That amendment was a standard update to our lending terms. All accounts were adjusted." "All accounts?" "Yes." "Then you won't mind showing me the amendments for the Henderson account, and the Morrison account, and every other ranch note this bank holds." Evelyn's fingers tightened on the desk. Just slightly. Just enough. "Those are confidential records. They were confidential when you changed them, too. That didn't stop you." The clerk was standing in the back doorway, frozen. Outside, through the bank window, Clara could see people stopping, watching, the way people always watched in this town, sideways, pretending not to. "Mrs. Crow," Clara continued, "in the past 15 years, Caleb Turner has made approximately 180 monthly payments on this loan. At $20 per payment, that's $3,600. I'm aware of Mr. Turner's payment history.
Then you're aware that at 6% simple interest on a $1,200 principal, the total owed, principal plus interest, comes to approximately $2,280. Evelyn said nothing. Mr. Turner has paid $3,600. The loan should have been satisfied 3 years ago. Instead, your records show a remaining balance of $940. Clara placed the bank statement on the desk. Where did the difference go, Mrs. Crow? The room went silent. Not the silence of an empty room, the silence of held breath, of people listening so hard they could hear their own blood. Payments were applied according to standard banking practice, Evelyn said. Her voice was steady, but her jaw had tightened. Interest accrues. Calculations shift. This is routine. Routine. Clara pulled out her ledger and opened it flat on the desk. I've reconstructed every payment Mr. Turner has made using his receipts and your bank's own statements. In year 1, his payments were applied correctly, half to principal, half to interest. By year 3, the split changed, 70% to interest, 30% to principal. By year 8, his payments were being applied entirely to interest. The principal hasn't moved in 7 years. Reverend Collins stepped forward. Mrs. Crow, I've reviewed Miss Whitmore's calculations independently. The numbers are accurate. Evelyn's eyes snapped to Collins. Reverend, this is a financial matter. I think it's a matter of honesty. And honesty is very much my concern. The front door opened again. Nathaniel Crow walked in. He was breathing fast, his collar crooked like he'd been summoned in a hurry. Behind him, and Clara's stomach lurched, was Judge Perkins. The judge was a thick man with a red face and small eyes that looked like they'd been pressed into dough. He walked in with the authority of a man who expected deference and usually got it. What's going on here? Perkins said. A private banking matter, Evelyn said quickly. Which doesn't require— It's not private anymore, Clara's voice cut through the room. And it's not just banking. It's fraud. Perkins turned to her. Young lady, that is a very serious word. It's a very serious crime. Clara didn't flinch. Mrs. Crow has been systematically misapplying loan payments for at least 7 years. She altered the terms of Mr. Turner's loan without his consent. And based on the pattern I've documented, I believe she did the same to the Henderson and Morrison accounts before foreclosing on their land. The room crackled. Nathaniel stepped forward. This is outrageous. This woman has been in town for a week, and she thinks she can— 8 days, Clara said. And in 8 days, I found what 15 years of your neighbors couldn't. Because none of them thought to check the math. The math is fine, Evelyn said. Her voice was harder now. The silk was gone. Mr. Turner's account has been managed according to standard procedures. If there are discrepancies, they're clerical errors. $740 in clerical errors? All in your favor? Every single one? Evelyn stood up. I don't have to sit here and be interrogated by a woman who arrived in this town as discarded freight. The words hit the room like a slap. Caleb moved. Not fast, not threatening, just forward. 1 step. And every person in that room felt the temperature drop. Say that again, Caleb said quietly. Evelyn's mouth closed. Go on, Mrs. Crow. Say it again. Tell this room what you think of the woman who uncovered your theft in 8 days, when your husband couldn't keep his word for 8 months. Nathaniel's face went red. Now you listen here, Turner. I'm done listening to you. Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper, but it filled every corner of the room. I've been listening to you for 15 years. Listening to your prices, listening to your terms, listening to your promises. And every word out of your mouth was a lie designed to take what my father built with his bare hands. Judge Perkins cleared his throat. Mr. Turner, I understand you're upset, but accusations without— Evidence?
Clara spread every document across the desk. Here's the original loan. Here's the forged amendment. Here's 15 years of payment receipts. Here's the bank's own statements showing the misapplication. Here's the price comparison showing 40 to 60% markup at Crow's store against standard wholesale. And here's Reverend Collins, who has reviewed every figure and will testify to their accuracy. Collins stepped forward. I've verified the calculations, Judge. The discrepancies are real, and they are substantial. Perkins looked at the papers. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at Nathaniel.
These are very serious allegations, Perkins said slowly.
They're not allegations, Clara said. They're arithmetic. Even so, this would need to be reviewed by whom? Clara's voice was steady as stone. By you? A judge who drinks whiskey with Nathaniel Crow every Thursday night? The room gasped. Perkins' face went dark red. Now, miss, you are dangerously close to— I'm dangerously close to the truth, Judge. And so are you. Clara picked up the amended loan document. This amendment was signed 3 months ago. The Henderson foreclosure happened 14 months ago. The Morrison foreclosure happened 26 months ago. If someone pulled the original loan agreements for those properties, I believe we'd find the same pattern. Altered terms, misapplied payments, manufactured defaults. A voice came from the doorway. She's right. Everyone turned. A man stood at the door, thin, weathered, hat crushed in his hands. Clara didn't recognize him, but Caleb did.
Tom Henderson, Caleb said. Tom Henderson walked into the bank on legs that shook. I lost my ranch last year. The bank said I'd missed payments. I hadn't. I paid every month for 12 years. But when they showed me the ledger, the numbers didn't match, and I didn't know how to argue with numbers I couldn't understand. His voice broke. I lost 60 acres. Land my wife's father cleared. And Evelyn Crow bought it at auction for $200. The silence after that was the loudest thing Clara had ever heard. Evelyn Crow sat down, slowly, like a woman feeling the ground shift under her chair. This is a misunderstanding, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. Clerical errors happen. If there are discrepancies— Tom Henderson's voice cracked with something raw. You call stealing a man's home a discrepancy. More people were pressing through the door now. The market had emptied. Faces filled the window. Ranchers, wives, children pushed to the back. Clara looked at Judge Perkins. You have 2 choices. You can order an independent review of every loan this bank holds, conducted by a qualified accountant from the county seat, not from this town. Or you can dismiss this, side with the Crows, and wait for the territorial governor to hear about it. Because I've already written the letter. Perkins stared at her. You wrote to the governor? I wrote to the governor, the Territorial Banking Commission, and the Federal Land Office. The letters are sealed and ready to post. Reverend Collins is holding copies of every document I've presented today. Collins held up a thick envelope. Sealed and witnessed. Evelyn Crow's face went white. Not pink, not flushed. White. The color of a woman who had spent 20 years building an empire on paper and just watched the foundation crack. You can't prove any of this in court, Evelyn said. I don't need court, Clara said. I need daylight. And right now, every rancher in this county is standing in your bank, watching you refuse to answer simple questions about simple numbers. Nathaniel grabbed Evelyn's arm. Evelyn, we should— Don't touch me! She pulled her arm free. The mask slipped, just for a second, and underneath was something desperate and cornered. This is a witch hunt,
No, Mrs. Crow. Clara gathered her papers. A witch hunt has no evidence. I have 15 years of it. Judge Perkins looked at the crowd. He looked at the papers. He looked at Tom Henderson's shaking hands and Reverend Collins' sealed envelope, and Caleb Turner standing in the bank like a man who'd finally stopped running. "I'm ordering a review," Perkins said. Evelyn's head snapped toward him. "Arthur!" "I'm ordering a full independent review of all loan accounts held by this bank, effective immediately. All collections and foreclosure actions are suspended until the review is complete." Nathaniel sank into a chair. His face was gray. He looked at Evelyn, and for the first time, Clara saw what he really was. Not a villain, not a mastermind, just a weak man who had married a strong woman and done whatever she told him. "This isn't over," Evelyn said. "No," Clara agreed. "It isn't. But the part where you win without anyone noticing? That part is over." Clara walked out of the bank. The sunlight hit her face and she stopped. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel the heat on her skin and realize her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the release of it. From the letting go of 7 days of tension that had coiled so tight inside her chest, she'd forgotten what breathing felt like. Caleb was beside her. "You did it," he said. "We did it. It's not finished. The review will take weeks. They'll fight it. Let them fight. The whole town just watched." Tom Henderson came through the door. He walked straight to Clara and took her hand in both of his. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but you just did something nobody in this town had the guts to do in 20 years. Clara squeezed his hand. "I'm just good with numbers, Mr. Henderson." "You're good with a hell of a lot more than numbers." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and walked away. Caleb and Clara rode back to the ranch in silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, a full one. The kind of quiet that comes after something big has happened, and the body needs time to understand it. Miguel was standing on the porch when they pulled up. He looked at their faces and let out a breath he'd clearly been holding since morning. "It worked?" "It worked," Caleb said. Miguel took off his hat and pressed it against his chest. "Thank God." "Thank Clara." "I'm thanking God first, then Clara, then God again." Miguel grinned. "I'll put the horses up." Inside the house, Caleb sat at the kitchen table. Clara sat across from him. The same table where she'd spread his receipts 7 days ago. The same chairs. The same dust. But everything else had changed. "Clara." "Caleb." "I owe you more than I can say." "You don't owe me anything. We had a deal." "The bookkeeping deal." "The partnership." He looked at his hands, those rough, scarred, honest hands that had built fences and dug ditches, and held a dying wife, and carried grief like a stone in his chest for 4 years. "It stopped being bookkeeping the day you wrapped my ribs," he said quietly. Clara's breath caught. "I told myself it was practical," Caleb continued. "I told myself I needed help, and you needed a place, and it was just logistics. 2 people solving each other's problems. But that ain't what it is, and I think you know that." "Caleb." "I ain't asking for anything. I need you to hear that first. I'm not asking. I'm telling you the truth. Because after what we did today, I reckon the truth is the only currency that matters." Clara's eyes burned. She blinked hard. She pressed her palms flat on the table. "When I got on that stagecoach in Philadelphia," she said, "I was running. My father died in debt. The school closed. I had no family, no money, no prospects. Nathaniel Crow's letters were a lifeline, and I grabbed on because I was drowning." "Clara, you don't have to—" "Let me finish." Her voice cracked. Just once. "I came to Texas looking for safety, a roof, a name. something to stand on. And when that clerk told me Nathaniel had married someone else, I thought, this is it. This is the end. I've run out of ground. She looked at him. And then you walked through that door. And you didn't offer me rescue. You offered me a choice. And nobody, not one person in my entire life, had ever done that before. Caleb's jaw tightened. His eyes were bright. So no, Clara said, it's not bookkeeping. It stopped being bookkeeping the moment you said, I couldn't let you fall. But I need you to understand something. What? I'm not staying because I'm grateful. I'm not staying because I have nowhere else to go. I'm staying because for the first time in my life, I'm standing next to someone who sees me. Not my situation, not my usefulness, not what I can do for them. Just me. Caleb reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. His palm was warm and rough, and it trembled, just barely, against her fingers. Then stay, he said. I'm staying. Not as my bookkeeper. No. Not as an arrangement. No. As what? Clara turned her hand over. She laced her fingers through his, held on. As your partner. In all of it. The ranch, the fight, the life. Caleb Turner had not cried in 4 years. Not when Sarah died. Not when the drought nearly took everything. Not when he sat alone at this table night after night, wondering if the silence would swallow him whole. But his eyes were wet now, and he didn't look away. Clara Whitmore, he said, you are the bravest person I have ever known. Then we're even, because you're the most honest man I've ever met. And I've checked the numbers. He laughed, rough and broken and real. And she laughed with him. And outside, the Texas sun beat down on Red Mesa Ranch the same way it always had. But inside that kitchen, at that table covered in dust and receipts and the wreckage of lies that had finally been dragged into the light, 2 people held hands across the wood and felt something they'd both forgotten existed. Not hope this time. Something stronger. Certainty. The review took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of waiting. 3 weeks of the town splitting down the middle like a log hit with an axe. Those who believed Clara's numbers, and those who believed Evelyn Crow's reputation. 3 weeks of whispers in the general store, sideways glances at the market, and a silence in the church so thick, Reverend Collins said his sermons felt like talking into a wall. Clara spent every one of those days at Red Mesa. She fixed the books. She balanced the accounts. She rebuilt 15 years of financial records into a system so clean that every dollar had a name and a destination. She taught Caleb how to read a ledger, how to track expenses, how to understand the language of money that had been used against him his whole life. And she did not share his room. That was the thing people in town couldn't understand. The thing that drove Evelyn Crow to distraction. Clara Whitmore lived under Caleb Turner's roof, worked at his table, ate at his hearth, and slept behind a locked door in a room of her own. It ain't natural, the women of the market whispered. It ain't proper, Evelyn told anyone who'd listen. It ain't your business, Eleanor Hayes said to every single one of them. On the first Monday of August, a man arrived on the morning stage from the county seat. His name was Walter Briggs. He was 53 years old, thin as a fence post, and he carried a leather case full of accounting tools and the letter of appointment from the Territorial Banking Commission. He did not smile when he stepped off the stage. He did not make small talk. He walked straight to the bank, asked for every ledger, every loan document, and every transaction record going back 20 years, and he sat down at Evelyn Crow's desk and began to work. Evelyn watched him like a hawk watching a snake. "This is highly irregular," she said. Briggs didn't look up. "Ma'am, I've audited 37 banks in this territory. None of them called it regular. All of them called it necessary. I'd like to have my attorney present." "You're welcome to. He can watch me add." Briggs worked for 4 days. He didn't speak to anyone except to request documents. He didn't eat lunch. He drank black coffee, and he filled 3 notebooks with figures so small they looked like insect tracks. On the 4th day, he asked to see Clara. She came to the bank alone. Caleb wanted to come. She told him no. "This is the part where the numbers talk," she said. "I need to be in the room when they do." Briggs was sitting at the desk with his notebooks open. He looked at Clara over his spectacles. "Miss Whitmore, I've reviewed your reconstruction of the Turner account." "And?" "It's the most thorough private audit I've ever seen performed by someone without formal accounting credentials." "I had good teachers and bad luck. Between the two, you learn fast." "Your figures are accurate. Every one of them." Clara's chest expanded. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath for 4 days. "And the other accounts?" she asked. Briggs took off his spectacles. He set them on the desk. He rubbed the bridge of his nose with the exhaustion of a man who'd seen too much of what people do with other people's money. "The Turner account is not an anomaly. I've identified the same pattern in 11 other active loan accounts held by this bank." 11. 11. Including 2 accounts that were foreclosed in the past 3 years, Henderson and Morrison. In both cases, the loan terms were amended without borrower consent. Payments were systematically misapplied to interest, and the resulting artificial default triggered property seizure. Clara sat down. "How much total?" "Across all accounts, the cumulative overcharge exceeds $14,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. $14,000. In a town where a ranch hand made $30 a month and a good horse cost $40. $14,000 stolen in plain sight over 15 years by a woman who signed her name to every lie. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "I've filed my report with the Territorial Commission. They'll forward it to the Attorney General. Mrs. Crow will face charges. So will anyone who knowingly participated in the scheme."
"Judge Perkins," Briggs looked at her. "That's not for me to determine, but the commission has been made aware of the relationship." Clara stood. "Mr. Briggs, thank you." "Don't thank me, Miss Whitmore. Thank yourself. I've seen fraud like this in a dozen towns. It usually succeeds because nobody checks the math." He put his spectacles back on. "You checked." Clara walked out of the bank and into the street. Caleb was waiting. She looked at him, and something broke open inside her. Not pain, not grief. Something bigger. Relief so enormous it felt like drowning in reverse. $14,000, she said. 11 accounts. She's done. Caleb didn't speak. He pulled her into his arms right there in the middle of the street. His cracked ribs protested, and he didn't care. He held her against his chest with both arms, and his chin against the top of her head. And he held on like a man who'd just been told the flood was over. Clara pressed her face into his shoulder. She didn't cry. She wanted to. Lord knows she wanted to. But she'd made a promise to herself the day she stepped off that stagecoach. No tears in public. Not in this town. Not where they could see. And she kept it. "It's over," she whispered. "No," Caleb said. "It's starting." The news traveled through Dusty Bluff faster than fire through dry grass. By the next morning, everyone knew. Evelyn Crow's bank was under investigation. 11 families had been cheated. The Henderson and Morrison foreclosures were fraudulent. And the woman who'd uncovered it all was a mail-order bride who'd been thrown away like last week's newspaper. Tom Henderson came to the ranch. He stood on the porch with his hat crushed in his hands
and tears running down his weathered face. "They said I might get my land back," he said. "The auditor said the foreclosure could be reversed." Clara nodded. "If the commission rules the default was manufactured, the sale is void. The land returns to you."
"My wife's buried on that land, Miss Whitmore, next to her father. I've been visiting their graves on someone else's property for a year and a half." Clara's throat closed. "You won't have to do that anymore." Henderson grabbed her hand. "I can never repay you. You don't owe me anything. You owe yourself 15 years of honest payments that should have been enough." He nodded. He couldn't speak. He put his hat on and walked away, and Clara watched him go with something burning behind her eyes that she refused to let fall. Miguel appeared in the doorway. "There's more of them coming." "More?" "Morrison's widow is on her way, and the Dalton family, and the Reeves, and I think I saw the Fenton boy riding in from the East Road." Miguel shook his head. "You opened a dam, Clara. Whole valleys flooding in." They came all day, one family after another. Ranchers who'd paid too much at the store. Widows who'd lost land they didn't understand they'd been cheated out of. Young men who'd inherited debts that shouldn't have existed. They came to Red Mesa Ranch because they'd heard that a woman with a ledger had done what no man with a gun ever could. Clara sat on the porch and listened to every one of them. She wrote down names, dates, amounts. She cross-referenced their stories against patterns she'd already identified. By evening, she had a list of 17 families who'd been affected by the Crow scheme. 11 currently. 6 historically, going back nearly 2 decades. Caleb sat beside her through all of it. He didn't speak much. He poured coffee. He brought chairs. He shook hands and tipped his hat, and let his home become the place where the truth lived. That night, after the last visitor left, they sat alone on the porch. 17 families, Clara said. 17. She almost got away with it. If Nathaniel had married me like he promised, if I'd never come to your ranch, she'd still be doing it. But he didn't marry you. No, he didn't. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. You know what I keep thinking? What? I keep thinking Nathaniel Crow did the worst thing he ever did to you. He broke his promise. He humiliated you in front of the whole town. He left you stranded with nothing. Caleb turned to look at her. And it was the best thing that ever happened to this valley. Clara stared at him. Then she laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and startled out of her. That's a terrible thing to say. It's a true thing to say. Those aren't always the same. They are tonight. 2 days later, Evelyn Crow was arrested. The territorial marshal came on the Thursday stage with 2 deputies and a warrant. He walked into the bank, read the charges aloud: fraud, embezzlement, forgery of financial documents, and conspiracy to illegally seize property. And he put Evelyn Crow in handcuffs in full view of the town. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood straight-backed and thin-lipped and looked at the crowd with the cold fury of a woman who still believed she was better than every person watching. Her eyes found Clara. "You think you've won," Evelyn said. Clara didn't flinch. "I think the numbers won. I just carried them. This town will forget what you did in the year. They always do." "Maybe, but the land records won't, and the commission won't, and the families you robbed won't." Evelyn's jaw tightened. The marshal took her arm. She pulled it free, one last gesture of control. And then she walked to the wagon under her own power. Nathaniel stood on the boardwalk, watching his wife being taken away. He looked like a man who'd been hollowed out with a spoon.
When the wagon pulled away, he walked back into the store and closed the door. He didn't come out for 3 days. The following week, Judge Perkins resigned. He did it quietly. A letter to the territorial governor citing health concerns. But everyone knew. The commission had found his name on 4 of the amended loan documents as a witness. He'd signed off on terms he knew were fraudulent, because Evelyn kept his debts forgiven and his whiskey glass full. A new judge was appointed from the county seat. His first act was to freeze all Crow-held properties pending the resolution of the fraud cases. His second act was to order the return of the Henderson Ranch. Tom Henderson got the news on a Tuesday. He rode out to Red Mesa that afternoon. He didn't say a word. He just walked up to Clara, took off his hat, and stood there with tears streaming down his face until she put her hand on his shoulder and said, "Go home, Tom. Your land is waiting." He rode away, and Clara watched him disappear down the road. And this time she let the tears come. Just a few. Just enough. Caleb found her on the porch, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You crying?" "No." "Looks like crying." "It's dust." "We do have a lot of dust." "Exactly." He sat down beside her, closer than he'd ever sat before. His shoulder touched hers, and neither of them moved away. "Clara?" "Caleb?" "The loan's been cleared. Briggs confirmed it this morning. The bank owes me a refund of $1,140 in overpayments. The southern pasture is free and clear." Clara closed her eyes. "Your father's land." "My father's land, my mother's grave, free and clear for the first time since 1861.
Caleb, that's wonderful."
"It is, and I want to do something with it."
"What?"
"I want to put your name on it." Clara's eyes opened.
"What?"
"The deed. I want your name next to mine. Not because you earned it, though Lord knows you did. Because that land is the most important thing I own, and I want it held by the person I trust most in this world."
"Caleb, you can't just—"
"I can, and I am, unless you've got an objection." Clara looked at him, at his rough hands and his sun-darkened face, and his eyes that held 4 years of grief and 2 weeks of something new. Something that looked like joy, but felt deeper, like roots finding water after a long drought. "I have one objection," she said. His face fell. "What?" "My name goes first." Caleb stared at her. Then he laughed so hard his ribs hurt, and he didn't care. "Done," he said, "and I want it in writing. I'll get Reverend Collins to witness it, and filed at the county seat. First thing Monday. Then I accept." He took her hand. She let him. They sat on the porch of Red Mesa Ranch with their fingers laced together and the evening heat settling around them like a blanket. "Caleb?" "I think the separate bedroom arrangement has run its course." His hand tightened on hers. "You sure?" "I've been sure for a while. I was just waiting for the right moment." "And this is the right moment?" "Your land is free. Your name is clear. The Crows are finished, and I'm sitting next to the man I love on a porch he built with his own hands." She looked at him. "If this isn't the right moment, I don't know what is." Caleb Turner had spent 4 years learning how to be alone. He'd gotten good at it. He'd turned solitude into a skill, silence into a companion, work into a wall between himself and everything that hurt. And now, a woman from Philadelphia with ink-stained fingers and a spine made of iron was telling him the wall could come down. "I love you," he said. Simple, direct. The way he said everything that mattered. I know, Clara said. I checked the numbers. You and your numbers. My numbers saved your ranch. Your numbers saved a lot more than my ranch. He kissed her. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of kiss that belongs in a novel. It was simple and warm and honest. Like him. Like everything about him. And Clara kissed him back with the certainty of a woman who had finally stopped running and found something worth standing still for. Miguel came around the corner of the barn, saw them, and immediately turned around. About time, he muttered to the horses. About damn time. The weeks that followed changed Red Mesa Ranch in ways that had nothing to do with money. Clara started teaching. It began small. Miguel's nephew came by one afternoon, and she showed him how to add columns of figures. The next day, he brought his sister. The day after that, 2 more children appeared. By the end of the month, Clara was holding classes 3 afternoons a week on the ranch porch, teaching reading and arithmetic to every child whose family couldn't afford the school in town. Word spread. Then the women started coming. The ranchers' wives, the widows, the young mothers who'd signed loan documents they didn't understand and sold property for prices they couldn't verify. They came to Clara not for school, but for knowledge. How to read a contract, how to check a ledger, how to understand the language of money that had been used to control them. Clara taught them everything she knew. "You're building something," Eleanor said one afternoon, watching from her rocking chair as 6 women sat on the porch with ledgers in their laps. "I'm just teaching arithmetic." "You're teaching power. Arithmetic is just how you spell it." Eleanor was right. Within 2 months, 3 women in Dusty Bluff had renegotiated supply contracts with the new store owner who'd taken over after Nathaniel closed up shop. 2 widows had recovered overpayments from old accounts. And Mrs. Dalton, a quiet woman who'd never spoken up at a town meeting in her life, stood in front of the county commission and presented a detailed accounting of her family's losses with the confidence of a woman who knew her numbers were right. Because Clara had checked them. Caleb watched all of this with the quiet pride of a man who understood he'd married someone extraordinary and had the good sense to stay out of her way. "You know what you've done, don't you?" he said one evening. "Taught long division? Changed this town. The town changed itself. I just showed them where to look." "That's the same thing." "It's really not." "Clara." "Caleb, take the compliment." "Fine. I changed the town. Are you happy?" "Getting there." On the last Saturday of September, Reverend Collins married them. Not in the church. On the porch of Red Mesa Ranch, with the evening sun turning everything gold. Miguel stood as witness. Eleanor stood as family. Tom Henderson and his wife came. The Daltons, the Reeves, the Fentons. Half the valley showed up uninvited, and Caleb didn't turn a single one away. Collins kept it short. He knew these 2 didn't need long speeches about commitment. They'd already proven it with ledgers and bruised ribs and the kind of courage that doesn't announce itself. "Do you, Caleb, take Clara as your wife and partner in all things?" "I do, and I already put her name on the deed, so she's stuck with me." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Do you, Clara, take Caleb as your husband and partner in all things?" "I do. And I've audited his accounts, so I know exactly what I'm getting into." More laughter. Caleb shook his head, grinning. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Caleb kissed her. The crowd cheered. Miguel whistled so loud, the horses startled. Eleanor wiped her eyes with a handkerchief she'd been pretending she didn't need. Later, after the food and the music and the toasts, after the last wagon rolled away and the lanterns burned low, Clara stood on the porch of her home, and looked out at the land that stretched to the horizon. Caleb came up behind her. He put his arms around her waist and rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about the day I arrived, standing in that street with my trunk in the dust and nowhere to go." "Worst day of your life?" "Best day of my life. I just didn't know it yet." "You know what I was thinking that day, when I saw you step off that stage?" "What?" "I thought, that woman is going to change everything." "And did I?" "You changed everything, Clara. The ranch, the town, the valley." He tightened his arms around her. "Me." Clara put her hands over his. Those rough, scarred, honest hands that had built fences and buried grief, and reached across a kitchen table to hold hers when the world was falling apart. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said. "What?" "Nathaniel Crow thought he was throwing me away. He thought I was a problem he could solve by ignoring, a letter he could leave unanswered." "And instead?" "Instead, he sent me exactly where I needed to be." Clara turned in his arms. She looked up at his face, sun-darkened, honest, the face of a man who kept his word. "I didn't come to Texas to find a husband, Caleb. I came to find out who I was. And it turned out I was someone who could walk into a bank and tear down a 20-year fraud with a pencil and a ledger. And marry a broke rancher with bad ribs. And marry the best man in the territory, who happens to have bad ribs. They healed. Because I wrapped them. Because you wrapped them." She smiled. He smiled back. "Caleb, Clara, I didn't just choose you. I know. And I didn't just choose this land. I know that too." She put her hand on his chest, over his heart. She felt it beating, steady, strong, the heartbeat of a man who had walked through grief and drought and loneliness, and come out the other side with his hands open and his word intact. "I chose myself," Clara said. Caleb covered her hand with his. "And that," he said quietly, "is why you're the strongest person I've ever known." They stood together on the porch of Red Mesa Ranch as the last light faded and the stars came out one by one over the Texas sky. Two people who had been broken by the world and rebuilt by each other. Two people who had learned that love isn't rescue, it's partnership. That dignity isn't given, it's claimed. That the measure of a life isn't what you're handed, but what you do when everything is taken away. Clara Whitmore came to Texas with a trunk full of everything she owned, and a letter from a man who never meant a word he wrote. She stayed because a different man meant every word he didn't. And she built something no one could take from her. Not with money, not with power, not with lies written in careful ink. She built a life that was hers. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.